All right, welcome. Today, we're going to put together a kind of user's guide to one of the biggest challenges of our time, the health of our planet. We'll break down the major issues and, more importantly, take a look at the global game plan to tackle them. So let's dive right in.
So this is really the core question of our century, isn't it? How do we keep moving forward? How do we build a better world without completely draining our planet's resources? It's a huge, huge challenge, but the good news is we're not flying blind. We actually have a powerful idea that's acting as our compass.
And that compass is this idea right here, sustainable development. This concept, which was clearly laid out more than 30 years ago, is basically our blueprint. It's all about a simple but profound idea. Let's meet our own needs today, but do it in a way that doesn't mess things up for our kids and grandkids. This is the foundation for everything else we're about to talk about.
But before you can fix a problem, you have to really understand it. You need a clear, honest diagnosis. So let's start there. Let's really get a handle on the key issues our planet is up against.
First up, a really quick but super important clarification. Let's talk weather versus climate. Weather is what's happening outside your window right now. Is it sunny? Is it raining? Climate is the long-term pattern. It's what you expect over years, even decades. You might grab an umbrella because of the weather, but you decide where to live based on the climate. And it's that climate, that long-term pattern, that's starting to change.
So what's causing that change? It really comes down to something called the greenhouse effect. The best way to think about it is like a blanket for the Earth. A certain amount of this blanket is totally natural. It's what keeps our planet warm enough for us to live here. But our activities are adding more and more of these greenhouse gases, which is like making that blanket thicker and thicker and thicker. And now it's starting to trap way too much heat.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, because not all of these gases are created equal. We talk about CO2, carbon dioxide, all the time, and for good reason. It's responsible for about 3/4 of the warming. But check out methane. It's about 28 times more powerful at trapping heat. And then there's nitrous oxide, which is just wow. It's 265 times more potent. This just shows you how complex the problem is. It's not just one thing we have to manage.
And what's the result of all that extra trapped heat? It's this number. So far, the average temperature of our entire planet has gone up by 1.1 degrees Celsius compared to how it was before the Industrial Revolution. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but for a global system as finely balanced as our Earth, that's a pretty significant fever.
And get this, that warming isn't happening evenly. Some places are feeling the heat way more than others. The Arctic, for instance, is warming up about 4 times faster than the global average. That just goes to show how the effects are concentrated in these really critical, fragile ecosystems, and it's causing some really drastic changes up there.
The consequences here they're profound. And it's not just about melting ice or hotter days, it's about life itself. Scientists estimate that a 2-degree rise in temperature puts almost 1/3 of all known plant and animal species at a high risk of going extinct, forever. We're not just talking about losing individual species here, we're talking about unraveling the entire web of life.
And to complete this little planetary checkup, it's not just about a warming climate. We've also been fighting other big environmental battles like ozone depletion. Remember the hole in the ozone layer? That was from chemicals called CFCs basically eating away at our planet's natural sunscreen. And then there's acid rain, where pollution from burning fossil fuels was literally making the rain acidic. The key takeaway is that all these issues are connected.
Okay, so we've looked at the big, global picture. Now let's bring it right down to our level, to the personal level. How can we actually measure our own individual contribution to this whole story? Well, that brings us to the idea of a carbon footprint.
The main tool we use is something called a carbon footprint. I absolutely love this analogy. Think of it as your environmental receipt. It's a tally of all the greenhouse gases, and not just CO2, that our daily lives create, from the electricity we use to the food on our plates.
So what does that receipt usually look like for the average person? Well, the biggest ticket items tend to be how we power and heat our homes, how we get from A to B, the food we choose to eat, all the stuff we buy, and of course, the trash we throw away. When you see it broken down like this, it gets a lot clearer where the opportunities are to make a real difference.
And if you want to get a little more technical, experts break our emissions down into 3 scopes. Scope 1 is the stuff you burn yourself, like the gasoline in your car. Scope 2 is the energy you buy from someone else, like the electricity that powers your lights. And then there's Scope 3, and that's everything else. It's the entire footprint of all the products and services you use. It really shows just how far our impact stretches.
So with that understanding of the problem and our own part in it, let's zoom back out. What is the world actually doing about all this? Is there a plan? Well, thankfully, yes. There is a global to-do list.
Now, this global cooperation didn't just happen overnight. It really started to get serious back in 1987 with the Montreal Protocol, which was all about saving the ozone layer. Then came the Kyoto Protocol, which set the first legally binding emission targets, mostly for developed nations. And that all led up to the huge one, the 2015 Paris Agreement, where for the very first time, pretty much every country on Earth agreed to take action.
And we really have to pause and talk about the Montreal Protocol, because it's an incredible story of success. It's probably the most successful international environmental agreement ever. By working together, the world has gotten rid of 98% of the chemicals that were destroying the ozone layer. It's just solid proof that when humanity decides to act together, we can solve these enormous problems. It's a huge beacon of hope.
So the Paris Agreement really built on that spirit of cooperation, but it came with a very clear and ambitious goal. Every country signed on to this to keep global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius, and to go even further and really try to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. Those numbers, 1.5 and 2 degrees, are now the North Star for all global climate action.
But you know what? The world's plan is actually even bigger and more holistic than just dealing with climate change. The real heart of the global to-do list for creating a sustainable future, it can be summed up in this one number.
17. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and they represent the entire world's shared checklist for a better future by 2030. And as you can see, they go way beyond just the environment. They connect climate action directly to things like ending poverty, achieving gender equality, and building peace. And the most important thing to get is that they're all interconnected. You can't really solve one without working on the others. It's a truly integrated plan for both people and the planet.
So, there we have it. We have a diagnosis of the problem, and we have a plan, a global to-do list. The agreements have been signed, the goals have been set. The only question left, and it's the biggest one of all, is whether our actions, all of our collective actions from governments down to you and me, will be enough to actually check all those boxes before it's too late.